Every weekend, millions of Americans kneel down in their yards and rip this plant out of the ground with their bare hands. They bag it up, they spray it with chemicals. They curse at it for coming back, and it always comes back because nature does not make mistakes. What they are throwing away is not a weed. It is the most nutrient-dense plant ever measured on land. Scientists at Yale called what this plant does a biological impossibility. And a cardiologist studying Mediterranean longevity found that the people who ate this every single day had 70% fewer deaths than those who did not fewer heart attacks, fewer deaths, from everything. I am going to show you exactly what this plant is, why the system spent 70 years trying to make you destroy it, and how to use it starting today. This plant is called Purslane, Portulaca oleracea. And I will tell you right now, if you have a yard, a driveway, a sidewalk crack, or a garden bed, there is a very high chance it is already growing within 20 feet of where you are sitting right now. The World Health Organization lists Purslane as one of the most widely used medicinal plants on Earth. Not one of the most interesting. Not one of the most promising. One of the most used. That distinction matters. It has been feeding and healing human beings for over 4,000 years. And in 1992, a researcher named Dr. Artemis Simopoulos published a nutritional analysis of Purslane that made other scientists question whether her lab samples had been contaminated. The numbers were that far outside of what anyone expected from a leafy green. They were not contaminated. The plant was simply that extraordinary. Let me give you the numbers, because I think you deserve to hear them plainly. 100 grams of fresh purslane leaves, that is roughly 2 large handfuls, contains 300 to 400 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids. That is 5 to 7 times more than the same amount of spinach. It is 15 times more than iceberg lettuce. And here is the detail that genuinely stopped me when I first read the research. Purslane contains EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid. If you have ever bought fish oil capsules, and Americans spend billions of dollars a year on fish oil capsules, EPA is the specific omega-3 you were paying for. Land plants do not make EPA. That is a marine omega-3. It comes from fish and algae. Except Purslane makes it. It is the only land plant ever confirmed to do this, and when Simopoulos published that finding, fellow scientists asked her to recheck her data. She did. The result stood. Beyond omega-3, Purslane delivers 7 times the beta-carotene of carrots, 6 times the vitamin E of spinach. It contains melatonin, the same hormone you pay $12 a bottle for at the pharmacy, produced naturally in the leaves. It contains glutathione, one of the most powerful antioxidants the human body uses to defend against cellular damage. It contains betalain, the pigment that gives the stems their reddish color, which has confirmed antiviral, antibacterial, and antifungal properties. And it does all of this at 16 calories per 100 grams. 16. You could eat a pound of this plant and barely register it on your daily intake. Now, compare that to the supplements sitting in your cabinet. Compare it to the $30 bag of baby spinach that wilts in 3 days. And then remember, this plant is growing for free in your yard right now, and you have been paying to kill it. If this is the first time you are hearing any of this, I want you to hit that like button right now. Not for the algorithm. Hit it because this information has been sitting in peer-reviewed journals for 30 years and no one put it in front of you. The least we can do is make sure the next person finds it faster. Now I need to tell you something that is going to make you angry. And I think you should be angry. Because the disappearance of Purslane from the American diet was not an accident. It was a business decision made by people who were not thinking about your health. After World War II, the American agricultural system reorganized itself around 2 crops, corn and soybeans. These were ideal for the new era of mechanized industrial farming. They grew in predictable rows. They were compatible with the broad-spectrum herbicides that chemical companies were eager to sell. They could be processed, refined, stabilized, and shipped across the globe in bulk. Purslane, on the other hand, grows wherever it wants. It spreads horizontally. It refuses to grow in neat rows. It is open-pollinated, meaning anyone can save seeds for free. You cannot patent it. You cannot control the supply chain. You cannot put it in a bottle and charge $20 for 30 capsules. So, in the 1950s and 1960s, agricultural extension offices across the country began classifying purslane as a noxious weed. Not because it was dangerous to people, but because it did not fit the model. By the time soybean oil had captured the American kitchen, the same soybean oil that is now linked to metabolic dysfunction and chronic inflammation, purslane, had been successfully erased from the national memory. The global herbicide market in 2024 reached $40 billion. Companies like Bayer and Syngenta sell products specifically formulated to eliminate purslane from lawns and gardens. Homeowners associations prohibit it. Your local extension office probably still publishes an eradication guide for it. Think about that structure for a moment. Every alternative omega-3 source is a controlled market. Wild fish populations are collapsing. Farmed salmon requires massive infrastructure and produces a nutritionally compromised product. Flaxseed oil goes rancid within weeks. Fish oil supplements cost $20 a bottle, and most people cannot tell you whether the ones they are taking have been oxidized before they ever opened the cap. Meanwhile, the most bioavailable plant-based omega-3 source ever measured is being sprayed with Roundup in suburban backyards across the country. That is not a coincidence. That is a market. Now I want to give you the clinical evidence, because I do not want you to take my word for anything. Researchers conducted a trial with 605 patients who were recovering from heart attacks. They split them into two groups. One group received the standard low-fat cardiac diet that American hospitals have been recommending for decades. The other group received a Mediterranean-style diet rich in purslane, walnuts, and omega-3 fatty acids. They followed these patients for 5 years. At the end of the study period, the purslane group had 70% fewer deaths. Not 70% fewer cardiac events. 70% fewer deaths from all causes. The study was stopped before its scheduled completion date because continuing to keep the control group on the standard American diet was deemed unethical by the researchers. The evidence of harm was that clear. That study should have changed everything. It should have been in every newspaper. It should have prompted a rethinking of hospital dietary guidelines. Instead, purslane remained a weed in the American imagination while the standard low-fat diet continued to be the official recommendation for cardiac patients for another 2 decades. I have been growing food for a long time, and I will tell you directly, the gap between what the research says and what reaches your dinner plate is one of the most frustrating things I encounter in this work. But that gap is exactly why this channel exists. And then in 2022, Yale University published something that genuinely broke the rules. To understand why it matters, I need to explain very briefly how plants capture energy from the sun. Most leafy greens, lettuce, spinach, basil, use what is called C3 photosynthesis. It works beautifully in cool, moist conditions. Corn and sugarcane evolved a more efficient system called C4 photosynthesis, which handles high temperatures and intense light better. Desert plants like cacti developed a third system called CAM photosynthesis, which allows them to seal their pores during the day to prevent water loss and only open them at night. The trade-off is that CAM plants grow very slowly. These 3 systems were considered mutually exclusive. A plant could use one, or in rare cases 2, but the metabolic machinery required was understood to be incompatible at the cellular level. Purslane uses all 3 simultaneously. Within the same leaf. The C4 system runs in the outer cells of the leaf during the day, capturing carbon dioxide efficiently. The CAM system runs in the inner cells, storing additional carbon dioxide overnight for use the next day. The 2 systems share resources and coordinate their activity in real time. Dr. Erica Edwards and her team at Yale described this in their published findings as something that, based on established plant biology, should not be possible. A single plant running C4 and CAM in integrated, coordinated fashion had never been documented before. What this means practically is that purslane can thrive in drought. It can grow in poor soil. It can handle heat that destroys other crops. As climate change reshapes which plants can survive where, purslane is not struggling. It is flourishing. It was built for exactly the conditions we are creating. The plant that the American lawn care industry has been trying to eradicate for 70 years may turn out to be one of the most important food plants of the next century. Drop a comment below right now and tell me, Did you pull purslane from your yard this year? Just say yes or no. I genuinely want to know how many people watching this have been unknowingly composting one of the most nutritious plants on the planet. You do not need to write a paragraph. Just yes or no. And while you are down there, subscribe if you have not already, because the next video in this series covers 3 more plants that your HOA has declared war on, and at least one of them has more vitamin C than an orange. Now, let me take you back 4,000 years, because this plant did not become a ghost overnight. Someone had to teach the world to forget it. In 1050 BC, someone living in northern Greece stored purslane seeds in a clay vessel and sealed it. When archaeologists opened that vessel 3,000 years later, they found thousands of tiny black seeds intact, identifiable, the same species still growing between the paving stones outside the excavation site. The continuity of that image is worth sitting with for a moment. Purslane has been with us, deliberately cultivated and preserved, since before the construction of the Parthenon. Ancient Egyptian medical texts reference purslane as a treatment for inflammation and digestive distress. Traditional Chinese medicine incorporated it for liver conditions and skin disorders. Roman soldiers carried purslane seeds the way modern soldiers carry energy bars, compact, shelf-stable, and nutritionally dense enough to sustain a march. In Mexico, it is still eaten today under the name verdolaga, sautéed with pork, served in tacos, added to stews. Half the world never stopped eating purslane. The other half was taught to poison it. Now let me tell you how to identify it, because this is where I want you to pay close attention. There are a handful of plants that can superficially resemble purslane, and eating the wrong one is not something I want on my conscience. Purslane has red or reddish-pink stems. That color is non-negotiable. If the stems are fully green, slow down and look more carefully. The leaves are small, thick, and shaped like a rounded spatula or a tiny paddle. They are succulent, meaning they hold water, so when you press one between your fingers, it feels plump and slightly rubbery rather than papery. The plant grows low to the ground and spreads outward in a star pattern from a central root. It does not climb. It does not vine. It hugs the earth. And if you pinch off a small piece of a leaf and taste it carefully, a tiny amount, you will notice a mild, lemony, slightly salty flavor. That is the moisture content and the mineral density expressing themselves at the same time. It is genuinely pleasant. The plant you are most likely to confuse it with is spurge, which also grows low and spreads in a similar pattern. The key difference: spurge has a milky white sap that appears immediately when you break a stem. Purslane has no milky sap. It is clear and slightly mucilaginous. If you see white sap, put the plant down and wash your hands. If the stem breaks clean and the sap is clear, you have purslane. Once you have positively identified it, here is how I use it. Raw in salads, it adds a crunch and a lemony brightness that genuinely improves the texture of any green salad. It holds up better than spinach under a warm dressing. I use it anywhere I would use arugula. Sautéed 3 minutes in a pan with olive oil and garlic. It wilts down like spinach but retains more texture and a slightly oceanic flavor note that I think comes from the EPA content. Add a squeeze of lemon at the end and eat it alongside eggs in the morning. That single meal covers a significant portion of your omega-3 requirement for the day. In smoothies, a handful of fresh purslane leaves in any green smoothie. You will not taste it. The lemony undertone blends completely, but the nutritional contribution is real. In soups and stews, added in the last 2 minutes of cooking. The mucilaginous quality actually acts as a mild thickener, the same property that makes okra useful in gumbo. If you cannot find purslane growing naturally in your area, seeds are available from Kitazawa Seed Company and True Leaf Market. A packet costs $3 to $5. Scatter the seeds on the surface of well-drained soil in late spring. Press them lightly, do not bury them, they need light to germinate. Water once. Then largely leave them alone. Purslane prefers neglect. It grows fastest in hot, dry conditions that stress other plants. It is, in my experience, the most forgiving edible plant I have ever grown. If you can keep a houseplant alive, you can grow purslane. One honest caution before I close: if you have a history of kidney stones, specifically calcium oxalate stones, speak with your doctor before adding large amounts of purslane to your diet. The oxalate content is lower than spinach, but it is not zero. And if you are pregnant or breastfeeding, the standard advice applies: consult your healthcare provider before significantly changing what you eat. Those caveats are real, and I will not minimize them. For the vast majority of healthy adults, however, Purslane is simply food. Extraordinarily nutritious food that happens to grow for free. Here is where I land after years of growing, researching, and eating plants that the mainstream food system has no financial interest in promoting. The most nutritious plant on land is currently considered a pest in the country that spends more on dietary supplements than any other nation on Earth. Americans spent over $50 billion on supplements in 2023. A meaningful portion of that money went to Omega-3 capsules, melatonin tablets, vitamin E soft gels, and antioxidant blends. Every single one of those nutrients is present in a plant that is attempting, persistently and for free, to grow in your yard. We were not taught to ignore Purslane because it is useless. We were taught to ignore it because useful things that anyone can grow for free are very difficult to build a business around. A weed, at its core, is just a plant whose value has been suppressed long enough that we forgot to ask why. Next time you see Purslane coming up through the mulch, through the sidewalk crack, through the edge of your raised bed, do not pull it. Crouch down and look at it the way someone in northern Greece looked at it 3,000 years ago when they decided it was worth saving in a clay jar, then bring it inside and eat it. If this video changed how you see your yard, share it with someone who spent $20 on fish oil this week. They need to see this more than the algorithm does. Subscribe to this channel if you want to keep finding food where you least expect it. I will see you in the garden.